I'm Andrea Nicole. I don't have an intro. I'm not very good with intros. But the one thing that I am good at is recommending movies. And this quarantine season, what we need the most is good movies. And I just have the list for you to watch this quarantine season, which may last until June or July. Hopefully not till August, but will last for a very long time. So, if you want to see the list that I have prepared, then keep on watching. Okay, let me just sip on my water. Okay, so I have 15 movies in this list, and they kind of range between easy watches and really hard-hitting, kind of pretentious watches. So I'm gonna start with the easy watches, and then we're gonna go from there. The first movie that I recommend is always going to be Thor Ragnarok, and that is because this movie made me love Thor. So if you're not very familiar with the MCU, which, why not? But if you aren't, Thor, before this movie, was like hella boring. He was not the worst character, but he was the blandest. And this movie just gave him so much more personality, and just gave him so much more weight as a character, because you kind of didn't really care about Thor in Thor the movie or Thor the Dark World, mostly because Thor the Dark World sucks, but we don't have to talk about that. But Thor Ragnarok, you can really see the change with the manner of how Thor is being dealt with, because he is a god, and it's so hard to create a character or to characterize a character when he's a literal god. And I think that Taika Waititi just is phenomenal at making characters such as Thor and Loki very relatable to an audience of, puny humans. So I really love this movie, not just because they massively changed Thor's character to make him more likable as a person, but also because the story is so, not really different, but it's such a refreshing tale that we haven't really seen from Marvel. Taika Waititi always describes this movie as like a family road trip movie in space, and I honestly agree with that. It's an amazing movie, and there's only like a minor things that I don't like about it, but other than that, this movie is amazing. For just an easy watch, don't even think about it. It's great. You don't have to watch the other Thor movies, because they kind of condense it in the very beginning, and you don't definitely have to watch the rest of the other movies in the MCU to understand this movie, because it can work as a standalone, and that's why I love it so much. The next movie is Legally Blonde. This summer quarantine season, I've gotten more into Legally Blonde, not because of the movie, although I love this movie as well, but because of the musical. After you watch this movie, I highly, highly recommend that you also watch the musical, because there are problems with Legally Blonde the movie, but the musical just fixes that. And I love it, and I recommend it to everybody. But the movie, I watched it first, like I think 2 or 3 years ago, and that was when I still thought that I wanted to be a lawyer, and this movie just kind of cemented that. I don't want to be a lawyer anymore, but it's still that feeling of like girl power that isn't very cringy, because there's a lot of movies right now that sort of have this, oh, women can do anything, we're indestructible, we have no flaws, and it's just like, yeah, we do. We kind of suck sometimes, and that's okay. And Legally Blonde just shows Elle being a human. I love Elle She's my role model, and I wish that more movies were like this, you know, showing a theme without shoving it to your face, you know? Because I don't want another Charlie's Angels, Elizabeth Banks. Come on. Anyway, the next movie that I recommend is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, because this movie's amazing, okay? It's one of my favorite Spider-Man movies ever. It's a really hard battle between Spider-Verse and Homecoming, because I think Homecoming is just a gem on its own, but Spider-Verse just hits a different chord for me. And this movie is so cute and amazing. If you think of Spider-Verse, this movie, the one, I kid you not, I know what you're thinking about. And you're thinking about that scene where Miles jumps, but then he rises into the city instead of falling into the city. And oh, when I saw that, I nearly bawled. I love this movie. It's what a comic book movie should look like. If you were to ask me what the best comic to movie adaptation is, I'm going to say Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Because this movie, it just encapsulates everything that you love about a comic book. The colorfulness, the really witty dialogue, the kind of weird, but very teenager, very Spider-Man dialogue. Please watch this movie. If you haven't watched this movie, shame on you. If you haven't watched this movie and you call yourself an MCU fan or a Marvel fan, I hope you rot in hell. I'm just kidding, of course. Kind of. Watch this movie. It's on Netflix, I think. So there's no point of you saying that you can't watch this movie if you have Netflix. So yes, I love this movie. There isn't much to say about it. I don't want to go on about how much I love this movie because it's just me being incoherent and just going, you know? It's great. The next movie is Ironman. Now, a lot of people actually haven't watched Ironman, the very, very first one, and I think that's a disgrace. You call yourselves MCU stans without watching this movie? Shame on you. I'm just being mean. Okay, it's fine. I love this movie, not only because it's basically the movie that started it all, but also because it just does a good job of showing an arc in a movie. When I watched this movie, even with all of the MCU movies out, when I watched this movie, I watched a movie with a start and with an end. I think that's what a lot of movies are missing right now, especially because they always seek a sequel. And I think Jack Howard has a video about this. Not quite sure what it is. I think it's the one with Suicide Squad. He talked about how a lot of companies these days always seem to just hope for a sequel, so they leave a lot of strings hanging, and they leave a lot to the imagination, and they never finish a story in a movie because they're hoping for a sequel, or because they already thought of the sequel, or because the sequel is already coming out. But when you present a film, it should have a clear start and clear finish, whether that finish be an open-ended finish or a tight, ribboned up story. It should have an end. It should leave the audience feeling, wow, I really did go on a journey with this character, and I know him more, and I appreciate him more, and I thought he was a dick before, but now I kind of love him. And that's what I felt during Ironman. And I think that this was the blueprint. That meme is still out, right? This was the blueprint. Stephen Strange, I don't know who else, every other sarcastic, cocky, egomaniac boy who turns out to be a superhero and becomes kind of loving and kind-hearted and stuff. Tony Stark was the blueprint. I miss him. Speaking of Tony Stark, the next movie is also an Iron Man movie, which is the best one, Iron Man 3. I'm not going to subvert expectations. Iron Man 3 is the best Iron Man movie. And if anybody says Iron Man 2 is good, I am quite sure that their parents don't love them. Anyway, Iron Man 3 is amazing. This one is I'm not quite sure. I think this was the first movie right after the Avengers, the first Avengers. And I mean, it's great. I love this movie because it just shows Tony in a more personal light. So we already saw him as the genius, I don't care about this whole thing person, to a loving and caring, genuinely selfish person who only cares about other people in Iron Man 1. We saw that again in Avengers, kind of. We saw him be sarcastic and we saw him interact with people who are also superheroes. But in Iron Man 3, I think it's the first time that you see him just really deal with his emotions, because in Iron Man 2 he kinda does, but like, I don't care about that movie enough to really have an opinion. Actually, I have an opinion and I hate it. So, but it's in Iron Man 3 that you really see him suffering because of the things that happened in New York. It's where you see him having troubles with his relationship because of the problems that he's having because of New York, and it's a great story. It's kind of nice to see Marvel just, open up that discussion on mental illness a little bit, even just a little bit, with Tony. It's just a wonderful story, and I hope that you watch it. So overall, Iron Man 3 is great. I love the relationship Tony has with the people that he's around, like Pepper, Rhodey, Harvey, Happy, and it's just nice seeing him be loved by the people that loves him. And I wish it ended there. I just like to think sometimes that Iron Man 3 was the end of his story, and then he just didn't fight anymore, He's retired, had a family with Pepper, didn't die, You get it. You get it. It's fine. Next movie. Okay, the next movie is Jojo Rabbit. I watched this actually during this quarantine season because I didn't have the time and I didn't have the copy of the movie, and I didn't get to watch it in the cinemas because it was like, I don't think they even showed it in this. If they showed it here in the Philippines, it was like very, very limited. It was like right after the Oscars, and then poof, nothing. But anyway, I love this movie. It's a comedy. It definitely is a comedy, and it's a very dark humor type of comedy, which I love. I love those types of comedies. I love how Taika Waititi directs this movie, and I love his rendition of Hitler. Like, genuinely. I think people underestimate this movie, for those who haven't watched it, because it is such a comedic take on World War II. But it's so much deeper than that. To those who haven't watched it, please watch it. Give it a chance. I mean, I don't know, I haven't really met people who didn't like this movie, because not a lot of people have watched this movie. Oh, if you don't know what it's about, it's just about this boy named Jojo who has an imaginary friend who is Hitler. And this is his adventures in Hitler Youth, and just his relationship with his mother, and finding out that there's actually a Jew living in their attic. The next movie is The Meyerowitz Stories, New and Selected. That's the whole title. It's directed by Noah Baumbach, and I didn't really mention the other directors before, but I wanted to mention Noah Baumbach because I love him, and He's one of my favorite directors. He's one of the, not really the only, but one of the only directors and writers I've seen that really uses film to its advantage. Noah Baumbach is one of the only directors and writers that I know that uses film as a way to really show realism. And that's something that I love about his movies. He's the one who directed Marriage Story. Great movie, by the way. I'm not going to recommend it for quarantine season because it's too painful, and I think everybody already watched it, you know? But anyway, the Meyerowitz Stories is a piece of art that just perfectly encapsulates the real conversations that we humans have. And a lot of it is talking over each other and not really listening and just spewing whatever we want to say to another person without really listening to them. Noah Baumbach just is an amazing writer, and he just captures so much realism into his stories. This is such a picture-perfect, realistic family drama about a very toxic father, honestly, and how his children reacts to him being toxic and how different their reactions are. I really, really, really love this movie, and I wish more people I wish that it got more Oscar buzz. And I think the reason why it didn't get Oscar buzz was because it was a Netflix movie. It's so sad. It should have gotten like a hella lot of awards, or even like nominations, but it didn't. Whatever. It's a fun, kind of sad, kind of really heartbreaking story, and I wish more people saw it. So that's why I'm recommending it to you. So the next movie is The Martian. This movie is great. I really love The Martian. I have the book of it, and I read the book, and the book is amazing, and then I watched this movie, and this movie is amazing. It has Sebastian Stan in it, if that's your cuppa. It has Jessica Chastain, it has Matt Damon. I mean, he's the central guy, so you kind of get that. It's directed by Ridley Scott, and The Martian is a comedy, kind of a dark comedy as well. And it's so fun. It's such a unique story, you know, because it's a very scientifically accurate story. Like, it's strangely accurate. And I think that's why I love it so much, is because it doesn't have to stray from scientific facts to be a good movie or to be a good story. It just has to work around the barrier of scientific fact and scientific knowledge, and I love that. It makes my brain extra wet. What? My brain. Don't censor that. I'm not gonna censor that. You get it. Brain should be wet. If it's dry, you're basically dead. Come on. Okay. Where was I? Oh yes. So yes, please watch The Martian. It's a great movie. I cried over this movie. Did you know that? I cried like a little bit. I shouldn't swear. I cried like a little baby when I watched this movie. And I hope you do too. So the next movie is a Korean movie. It's not Parasite. It's actually Hyung, which is starring Kyung-soo, or D.O. from EXO. And another Korean actor. I'm not really sure who. Please forgive me. But this movie is it's gut-wrenching. It's about a boy who loses his eyesight during some kind of match, and he has to learn to be more dependent to the people around him, and to be closer to his brother. I think that's a horrible summary of it. But Hyung is a really good movie that shows a really good representation of sibling love to like a very weird extent, because the Hyung, or the older brother, was in prison But it's a really, oh my god, this movie. It's like coming back to me. I also cried in this movie. Korean movies are really good because, like what I said in Ironman, it has a start and a finish. It has a beginning and an end. And it's one of those movies that just kind of wrap it up in a nice bow, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. There's a lot of Korean movies that I've watched that sort of prolong an ending just so it can be, I guess, well-rounded. But this movie does the ending perfectly, it does the beginning perfectly, and it does the middle perfectly. It's a perfect movie. Next movie is Little Women. I watched this, I think, 5 days ago or something, and I've never watched Little Women before, but I had read it in the past. I just kind of forgot the story. But this movie just completely just dissects the story and just makes it so much better. Greta Gerwig is an amazing writer/director, and I wish she makes more movies, okay? Her and Noah Baumbach are the perfect couple, and I wish them all the happiness in the world, because they're perfect for each other. Please make more movies, separately or together. I don't mind. Just make more movies. But anyway, Little Women is an amazing story, partly because it came from an amazing book, but also because Greta Gerwig manages to make it so relatable. I mean, it was pretty relatable before, but in a way that you get to empathize with each of the characters rather than just empathize with Joe. Because I noticed in the book that since Joe is the persona of the writer, we see Joe more in the story. We see her struggles, we see her failures, we see her whole life. And the other sisters are just sort of not really second to Joe, but supporting her in the story. But in this adaptation, it just makes it so much more well-rounded. You kind of see all of their thought processes, and you see more of their gripes, more of their happiness, and allows more time for us to know these characters fully. Like, a lot of people hated Amy before this movie, because from Joe's point of view, she's a brat. She's a person who gets whatever she wants, you know? And Joe doesn't get what she wants, and if you empathize with Joe, you also empathize with her hatred for Amy, and that just kind of fuels your hatred for Amy also. But Greta Gerwig really made Amy so much more well-rounded as a character. You realize why she does these things, and you understand her thought process as to why she's doing the things that she's doing, why she chose to do the things that she does, and it's great. And I love the way that they tell the story, from like a really bright orange childhood full of sunlight to a really blue and cold and just lifeless future or present, sorry. And just, it's a great movie. I love this movie. I don't know what to say. The next movie, it's Birdman. Birdman. It's a great movie. I don't know, it made me laugh a lot, but it also made me cry a little. I'm just a crybaby. Oh my god. I think it's not the movie. I think it's just me. I'm just torn. It gives me secondhand embarrassment. When I watched this movie, I had to watch it I had to stop watching it, and then I continued it in the following days, because it just made me so uncomfortable. And I don't really like feeling that secondhand embarrassment, and you feel it a lot in this movie. It just shows you the awful, gruesome parts of being kind of a washed out celebrity or an actor. So basically, this guy, I forget his name, let's just call him Birdman. So he was in this TV show or movie series, I think it was a movie series, called Birdman, and he was the titular character, and then that kind of faded, and then he also kind of faded. and now he's trying to make a comeback in Broadway to this mediocre play that he directed himself, and he just has to work with things that he's never really thought about before, like money, budget, critics, and other better actors that are more talented than him, the director. And it's a tale about ego, narcissism, acting, Broadway, and Hollywood. So yes, watch it, it's great. There isn't much to say about it. I just wish people saw it more, because here in the Philippines anyway, it was very underrated. People barely talked about it because nobody really cares about actors, But it's just a fun little story that gives me secondhand embarrassment. So, yes. Next movie. If you don't know me, hi. I love David Fincher. I said in this video that Noah Baumbach is one of my favorite directors, but David Fincher is legitimately my favorite director ever. And this movie is actually the movie that started my obsession with film, and it's such a good movie. Yes, the movie is Gone Girl. This movie is amazing. It's the first movie that I watched that dealt with really serious themes. It just blew my mind how color can change the mood of a scene, how the camera works to heighten a scene, it's great. This movie made me. If not for this film, I'd be a loser, to be honest. Yes, this movie's great. I think a lot of people have already watched it, but if you haven't, please watch it. It's about Nick Dunn and his wife, who suddenly goes missing. And it's just up to these two detectives to find out what happened to Amy Dunn and if Nick Dunn is actually the reason for her disappearance. So, it's great. I enjoy it thoroughly, and I wish more people see it, even though a lot of people have already seen it. But it's fine. Next movie, it's also a David Fincher movie. It's Seven. This movie fucked me up. This movie gave me the nightmares. From the title, it's about the 7 deadly sins, and about this murderer who keeps murdering. Who keeps killing people according to their deadly sin. So, gluttony, lust, pride, anger, envy, and then the other two. I don't know the rest. I'm not a Satanist. It's a great movie. Brad Pitt is in his best. Morgan Freeman is in his best. It's just an amazing thriller. It's an amazing mystery. And if you love Gone Girl and you haven't watched this movie, I highly, highly recommend it, because it's the peak. It's peak David Fincher. And he's amazing. He's great. It's an amazing movie, and it's an amazing story, and it's an amazing cast. It's an amazing cast. And that's all I'm gonna say about it. Okay, please watch it. Next, I only put this in because it's quarantine season, and I think that we can really garner a lot from this movie, and it's the movie Contagion. This movie is a need right now. I'm just gonna tell you the story because from the title you kind of guess what it is. Contagion is about a woman who spreads a deadly virus to hundreds, if not thousands, of people, and ultimately causes a pandemic. That's what this is about. Yeah, it stars Gwyneth Paltrow. It's basically Gwyneth Paltrow goes into, I forget which country it is, but she was in like a party in this different country, and then she contracts the virus from this chef who she shakes hands with, and then it just spreads from there. And it's oh my god, it made me afraid to touch anything and everything. And yeah, it's just a great way to tell you to wash your hands. I don't want to die because of your crusty hands. The next movie, the second to the last movie that I highly, highly recommend, is obviously The Social Network. The Social Network is amazing. It's my favorite movie of all time. I used to say that Arrival was my favorite movie, but I kind of backtracked. I'm starting to look uglier and uglier the more that I look at myself, and I hate it. So, The Social Network is also directed by David Fincher. It's written by Aaron Sorkin, and I'm telling you these information because those two working together is the biggest crossover that I could have ever hoped for. Like, Endgame who? Like, Hannah Montana, Sweet Life on Deck, Wizards of Waverly Place, who? Like, I love this movie. Like, no other duo can ever do as well as these two did. The way Fincher directs and the way Sorkin writes just matches so well. It's just Aaron Sorkin's snappy and very musical dialogue matched with David Fincher's cold and just also snappy camera work is just something that I dream about. It's an amazing journey, it's an experience, and I can't believe that it's a story about the creation of Facebook. So the last movie that I want to recommend to you is Arrival. Love this movie. This movie, I love science fiction, and the science fiction that I love is perfectly captured in this movie, because the science fiction that I love is science fiction that tackles human behavior in the guise of figuring out alien behavior, and sci-fi for me is finding out more about ourselves the more we learn about other species. It reminds me so much of Star Trek, like the original series, and that's why I love it so much, because it's just nerds trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I highly recommend it to everybody who I've ever come to know. It's great. Amy Adams is amazing in this movie. The story is amazing. It's from a short story, and basically the premise is these weird spaceship things land on Earth in different spots. So there's, I think, 3 in America, there's 1 in China, there's 1 in Russia, there's like quite a few in South America. I forgot the countries that they mentioned in the movie, but it's fine. And Louise, who is Amy Adams, is tasked to understand their language, for them to understand why they came here in the first place. And in the process, it shows a lot of political differences, a lot of just human error, done in the most beautiful way I could ever think of. So this movie is amazing. It was my favorite movie of 2019, and it's my second favorite movie of all time. So those are the movies that I recommend to you guys for this quarantine season. There are a few more movies that I want to talk about, not in a recommending way, more of like, I want to talk about this. And a lot of the movies here actually are movies that I want to speak about more in depth and just talk about what happened in the movie, how the movie was made, how the movie was written. That's something that I enjoy. I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to see you next time with another video about movies. Because if you haven't noticed, I love movies. So, have a safe quarantine, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!